how many of you know me and know my work? Okay, how many of you don't know me from Adam? One wonders why you're here, exactly. How many of you are currently, how many of you are therapists? Oh, quite a few. How many of you are spiritual practitioners of some kind? Okay. How many of you are currently in a relationship as we speak? Mm-hmm. And how many having second thoughts about that we should probably talk about? Are relationships difficult? Relationships are really difficult. I usually say at this point, I know exactly why my marriage of 35 years has been so difficult. My wife, Belinda Berman, is a very difficult person. But it's hard for me to say that because she's in the audience today, so I have to be kind of a little bit cool. Have you ever wondered about what makes intimacy so hard? We have never wanted more from relationships, from our long-term intimate relationships than we do right now. It is historically a brand new phenomenon. It's what my pal, how many of you know Esther Perel by any chance? It's what my pal Esther calls the grand ambition of love. You will be everything to me. You know, what we used to get met by an entire village, we now expect to get met by one person for the rest of our life. Where we used to marry in order to have sex, now we marry and only have sex with one person, most of us anyway. Things have changed, but have we really changed with them? I think what we want in our relationships is we want a spiritual connection, we want aliveness, we want passion. Essentially what we want is a long-term lover relationship for the rest of our lives. We've taken how many of you are married? Oh, quite a few, okay. To the person you're with? Anyway. We've taken the stability of a long-term marriage and we've grafted onto it the passion and connection and intimacy of a romance, of a lifelong romance. And the problem is that we just don't teach our sons and daughters in this culture, which we're going to talk about in a minute. We don't give our sons and daughters the skills that they need. We haven't been given the skills that we need that are sophisticated enough to match this new sophisticated ambition. We don't teach kids how to fight fair. We don't teach kids how to speak up for themselves. We don't teach anybody how to listen and put yourself aside and really be there for your partner. This is all stuff you pick up along the way, or you don't. Why don't we teach these things? I would like to have relationship skills taught in elementary school, junior high, high school, and college. I'd like our kids to know about as much about how to have a relationship as they would about their own physical health or social well-being. Yeah, I'll take that. Now, I'll tell you why we don't teach our kids this. I mean, you may. In our own little nuclear families, you try. But as a culture, why we don't? Because we don't live in a relationship-cherishing culture. I'm sorry to have to tell you this. But we all live to this day under the rule of patriarchy. Patriarchy is the larger system. Patriarchy is the water, and we are the fish that swim in it. Now, I don't know. I've been talking about and writing about and arguing against patriarchy for 35 years now. And it's really interesting. When Obama and Michelle were in 8-9 years ago, you talked about patriarchy and half the audience would fall asleep. And you'd say feminism and half the audience would walk out the door. But something happened in 2016. I'm not going to say what exactly. But all of a sudden, the idea that we live in a post-patriarchal world and that all of that stuff is behind us is no longer real. And all of a sudden, the issue of looking at power, dominance, aggression, irresponsibility, masculinity, and traditional femininity, all of a sudden these things are really, really important to each of us and to all of us as a culture. What we do with intimacy under patriarchy is what we do with many things deemed feminine under patriarchy. And let's be clear. Patriarchy is essentially a binary. There's a split. Half of human qualities we call feminine, half of human qualities we call masculine. Is everybody clear about this? Everybody knows which side is which and what goes where. Are we clear? Okay. The other part of patriarchy is, first is the binary, and then there's the hierarchy. Give me some masculine qualities, somebody. Strong. Huh? Independent. Brave. Okay, here's some words that don't come up when I ask about masculine qualities. You ready? Love. I never hear love when I ask somebody to talk about men. Or connection. Or vulnerability. Or yearning. It's strength, independence. It's all those things. And the feminine side? What's on there? Nurture. You can stop right there. Nurture, 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 and more nurture. Sensitivity, emotionality, vulnerability, dependency, hysteria. These things, these qualities cut both ways. Now, are these qualities held as separate but equal? In the traditional setup, they are not. Masculine qualities are exalted, feminine qualities are devalued. I call this the dance of contempt. I'll be working with you guys all day today and into the evening with the wonderful Michaela. She's going to be working with the women, and we're going to be taking this stuff apart. But the thing that I have to tell you, both men and women, gay and straight and lesbian and trans and all the rest, you cannot be faithful to the model that you were raised in and be intimate at the same time. In other words, the traditional gender roles of men and women are not built for intimacy. They're built for production and consumption and stability. Intimacy is a new demand, and a great one. The second thing I want to say, and this may be a little bit different for you guys out here in California, but when I say that we historically want an intimate relationship, a long life love relationship for the first time, long walks on the beach, holding hands, heart-to-heart talks, great sex in our 60s, 70s, and beyond. When I say we, do I mean both men and women equally? Maybe in this group, because you're an enlightened group. But out there in the world where I talk most often, the push for a more intimate relationship is coming primarily from women. Here's what I am, for those of you who don't know me. In 1997, I published a book called I Don't Want to Talk About It. It's a great thing to do at a cocktail party. Oh, you published a book? I don't want to talk about it. Anyway, it was the first book ever written about male depression. Depression had been seen as a woman's disease until that book came out. And I'm very proud of my part in putting male depression on the map. I began to get calls, because there's a lot of clinical stories in the book, from California. I'm from Boston. From California to New York, wherever. Do you have somebody who does the kind of work that you do? And now I do. We have a training institute and we have therapists we've trained. Where's Bonnie? Bonnie, stand up. Bonnie is a trained relational life therapist from LA who came here. So we have therapists around the country, but back then I couldn't say that. And so what I began to say after a while was, hey, look, if you're desperate enough and crazy enough, come to Boston and we'll work together. And people started flying in to see me, couples on the brink of divorce. These are all couples that no other therapist had been able to help. And this was the last stop. I called it a relational intervention. And in this relational intervention, we spent 2 days, the three of us, face to face, 2 whole days. At the end of the 2 days, the three of us would decide together, you're back on track or you're getting a divorce. That's it. This is the last stop. And I had a pretty good track record of saving couples. And the thing that I noticed about that is, by the way, I broke most of the rules that I learned about couples therapy in these interventions. For you therapists, let me see the therapist in the room. How many of you learned in your therapy practice and training, when you're dealing with a couple, the cardinal rule is thou shalt not take sides? If you quote unquote lose your neutrality and side with one partner and say you're right, you're not so right, then you have to go to your supervisor and talk for a while about your mother. Then you regain your neutrality and you're back in the work that I do, we take sides. We side with the underprivileged one. We side with the underpowered one. I have a saying, in relationships, I want the weak to stand up, I want the mighty to melt. And here's the thing. How many of you ever heard you can't love somebody until you learn how to love yourself? Let me see hands. How many of you heard that? Can I ask you guys a question? What the hell does that mean? I mean, really, what does that mean? I'll tell you what it means. When we first talking, what I am about here, let me be clear about what I'm about, and then I'll go back to what that means, loving yourself. In the words of the great Harvey Milk, I am here today to recruit you. I am here to invite you to live a deeply relational life instead of a linear patriarchal life. A linear patriarchal life is a lot what we've been living. And a truly relational life is something that has to be cultivated and practiced and learned. What do I mean by a truly relational life? I mean that you exist in a state of authentic connection, loving connection to yourself and to others. A state of authentic, loving connection to yourself and to others. So let's start with your relationship to yourself. Let me ask you this. How many of you here give yourselves a hard time when you screw up? I mean, like a seriously hard time. How many of you give yourselves a hard time? Yeah. Hold your hands up for a second. Everybody hold your hands up who's got that. Take a look around. Let's talk about self-esteem in this culture. Every time you are engaged in aggressive, negative self-talk, you are in a shame state. You are in a self-esteem failure. What is healthy self-esteem? Which is rare in this culture and which I usually have to teach people. Healthy self-esteem, and I owe this to one of my great mentors, Pia Melody. How many of you know Pia? Pia Melody's work? Okay. Healthy self-esteem is your capacity to hold yourself lovingly in the face of your screw-ups and imperfections. Let me say that again. It's the capacity to hold the way you do with a child who screws up. It's your capacity to hold yourself warmly and tenderly in the face of your screw-ups and imperfections as a human being. How many of us have that? I teach it. There's a two-step process, and I'm determined to give you guys practical skills as well as abstract information. There's a two-step process of working with negative self-talk that I use. The first is you lean into that immature part of you that is giving you a hard time. And the first thing you recognize is it's you. It's an immature part of you. We call it the adaptive child part of you. Look, we tend to hold ourselves the way we were held. If you were held indulgently, you'll indulge. If you were held harshly, you'll be harsh. We recreate the relationship with ourselves that we had growing up. So loving yourself in the face of your screw-ups and imperfections is an art. It's a practice. It's like building a muscle. It's like a mindfulness practice. You have to do it. You don't think about it. You do it. I'll tell you a story. May I tell you a story? I like stories. I'll tell you a story to illustrate this. I was giving a talk like this, much bigger therapy audience, a few hundred people, and I was late, and the person making my arrangements and stuff, looking after me, said I was signing books, and the person said, Terry, you're gonna miss your plane. I went, oh my God! And I gathered up everything, and we whisked off. I'm on the plane. I got my shoes off. I got a nice glass of Chardonnay. I'm feeling great about the day, and I feel this cold splotch on my shirt. True story. And I look down, and there's this black puddle of ink all over my shirt. I'd been signing with a Sharpie, and I put it back in the shirt without a lid. And the whole thing was... And not only that, but this was one of my, I hope I get on Oprah, I'm going on TV shirts. This was like a several $100... Now look, I've got ADD, and I'm always breaking things, losing things, ruining things. Ask my wife. And I'm also depressive. I've been struggling with depression ever since I've been a little boy. Now I want to tell you, when I look down at that shirt, back in the day, before I was in recovery, which I consider myself as being, and when I say recovery, I mean relational recovery. Not an addiction recovery. I mean recovering that state of secure attachment, of relatedness, that is our birthright. Anyway, I feel like I'm in pretty good recovery now, but I knew I was, because formerly, if I looked down at that splotch, that could have triggered a 5-day depression. Literally. And what would it be? It would be me beating up me. When you listen to a depressed man or woman, what you're listening to is one part of the person beating up another part of the person. It's violent. It's internalized violence, emotional violence. And what I say to you, those of you who give yourselves a hard time, like me, is this. And you got to ask yourself, would I put up with somebody external talking to me like this? Would I put up with a friend or a partner saying these things to me? I would not. I would tell them to pipe down. But because it's me saying these things to me, I feel helpless. Well, I want you to push back. And so what I said to that adaptive child part of me, little Terry, little harsh Terry, who was giving me such a hard time, I said, hey, listen, let's be clear, okay? The same ADD brain that ruined this shirt is the brain that wrote the book that was being autographed. So why don't you pipe down? And it did. And when I have people begin to intervene on the way they talk to themselves, the way they relate to themselves, replace harsh transactions with more loving transactions, deliberately, consciously, and better at it as they do it. It's a revolution. And the revolution is this. In our culture, our relationship to relationships, including our relationship to ourselves, is passive. Diane was talking beautifully about complaint. Complaint, I mean, I'm a New Yorker. Complaint is my middle name. The thing about, I forgot what I was about to say. Okay, anyway, holding yourself in warm regard even when you screw up. Now, if you don't feel bad about screwing up, that's shamelessness. That's grandiosity. That sets you up to be offensive. I don't care. If you take it into an ad hominem attack, I'm a rotten person, that's shame or toxic shame. In between these two is healthy guilt. I feel bad about what I did to you. Let me make amends to you. Let me make repair with you. How can I make this better for the two of us? Shame is of no value to anybody. And one of the things when I'm working with, one of the things that's different about the work that I do from other therapies is that I pay at least as much attention to issues of grandiosity as I do issues of shame. Because I work with men, to be honest. And when you're working with men, a lot of men lead with grandiosity and have covert issues of shame, where a lot of women lead from the one-down shame position and have hidden issues of grandiosity. Does everybody know what I mean by grandiosity? Superiority, being above the rules, being contemptuous of another, looking down your nose at. Psychotherapy and self-help has done a great job over 50 years of helping people come up from the one down of shame. We've done a terrible job of helping people come down from the one up of grandiosity. And if you're going to move into intimacy, you cannot be intimate from either a one up, I'm superior to you place, or a one down, I'm inferior to you place. Intimacy demands democracy. We are equal. You are no better and no worse than me. We are the same. So one of the first order of business, if you're going to love somebody else, is to learn how to straighten out your own self-esteem. Because you cannot love somebody from a shame place, and you cannot love somebody from a grandiose place. You have to get straight in order to be truly present for another human being. I want to say now how much time do I have? I have until when? 11:50, is that right? Yes. Yeah, okay. I want to say, for those of us who struggled in our relationships, that struggle is what intimacy is. Struggle is the name of the game. I take my model of what intimacy looks like from Ed Tronick. He's a Harvard developmental researcher. He's one of the first generation, along with Barry Brazelton, to stick a camera in front of mothers and infants and actually record what they do. Before this observation, we all figured out about mothers and infants from adults in analysis and went backward. Freud said that the relationship between infant and mother is one of uninterrupted oceanic bliss. I don't think Freud was a mother. If you look at real mothers and real infants, according to Ed Tronick, it's an endless dance of harmony, disharmony, and repair. Closeness, disruption, or return to closeness. This is the essential rhythm of all relationships, I believe. It's like walking. Balance, imbalance, balance. It's how we grow. It's how we extend ourselves. There's a beautiful quote by Suzuki Roshi here in California, talking about imbalance. Suffering and imbalance is the way we live. And it feels like suffering and imbalance when it's not silhouetted against the great true nature, Buddha nature. When you see it silhouetted against the great backdrop, it stops feeling so unbalanced and it starts feeling perfectly balanced. But the imbalance that you're in is how we operate. It's how we grow. The way that works in relationships is this. We tend to, and spiritual practitioners are horrible at this in particular, we tend to idealize relationships. So a good relationship is all harmony, all closeness. Just like a good body is an 18-year-old body and a good sex life is 3 times a day till you're 80 and all this nonsense. The reality is that a real relationship is about the 3 phases over and over and over again. Harmony, disillusionment, repair. Now you can go from harmony, disillusionment, and repair 12 times in one dinner conversation. Or it can last over years of your relationship. The first phase, the harmony phase, I call love without knowledge. Love without knowledge. There's a deep soul connection that this is your person. That can happen. That's real. I believe in that. I believe in love at first sight. You know that that's your person. But look, Belinda, my wife, hung up the phone after 3 hours with me, called her girlfriend and said, I'm going to marry that guy. She knew after one conversation that I was her life partner. She had no idea what the bottom of my closet looks like or my checking account. Love without knowledge is that harmony phase. The disillusionment phase comes right after. James Framo, the father of couples therapy back in the 50s, when it was assumed if you were in bed with somebody, it was your wife or husband, he wrote, The day you turn over in bed and look at the person sleeping next to you and say to yourself, oh my God, this has been a dreadful mistake. This is not the person that I fell in love with. That, says Framo, is the first day of your real marriage. Harmony, disharmony, repair. Now let me tell you something about disharmony. It sucks. And I talk about relational shame, just like individual shame. Relational shame is feeling like the couple to the left and to the right of you is fighting less and having better sex than you are. You're ashamed of your own coupledom. When in reality, everybody is struggling. When you're in disillusionment, it is hard. It can be really dark. The imperfections that your partner is throwing at you really stick in the craw. I talk to people about what I call normal marital hatred. Normal marital hatred. And I got to tell you, I've been talking about normal marital hatred for 20 years. Not one person has ever come up afterwards and said, Terry, what do you mean by that? That disharmony phase is tough. And it can really get you. And then you move into repair. That's where all the skills come in. Moving from disharmony back into harmony. Moving from disillusionment back into repair. That's where the skills come in. But the problem is, when you're in that disillusionment phase, you are not in the part of you, by and large, that is going, oh goody, let me use some skills. You're in the part of you that is reactive, angry, victim-y, indignant, controlling, pissed off. In other words, you're in your limbic system. There are different parts of us. And in the work that I do, I say the most important question for a couples therapist, any therapist when they're talking to somebody, is not what are the stressors? Because a good couple or a well-adjusted individual will be able to handle stressors. It's not even what's the dynamic between these two. That's really important, but it's not what's critical. Here's the most critical question. You ready? Which part of you am I speaking to? Which part of you am I speaking to? Am I speaking to the adult part of you? We call it the functional adult part of you, prefrontal cortex, observing ego, the part, second consciousness, mindfulness, the part of you that can see, observe, notice, choose to do something different, the part of you that's in charge of your recovery, or are you in the adaptive child part of you, which is an older child, but still a child, the part of you that adapted, the part of you that learned how to get along? Or are you in that sobbing, wounded part of you that's even younger? Here's the bad news. It is only the functional adult part of us that will use skills. It is only the functional adult part of us that wants to be intimate. The wounded child part of us is just overwhelmed. And the adaptive child part of us is not about intimacy, it's about survival and self-protection. If you want to be intimate, the first thing you have to do is come out of your triggered self and get re-centered into the functional adult part of you. Otherwise, all bets are off. Who you are will determine whether the interaction is successful or not. Not what you do, who you are. I go around the country and I do workshops for individuals and couples. And we have a million slides. And one of the slides I really like is a slide that says, other workshops teach you skills. We deal with the part of you that won't use them. So the proto skill, the skill, the first skill from which all other skills depend is mindfulness. If you don't realize that you're triggered, do some breathing, get yourself back into center, and then use your skills. The skills are going to go absolutely nowhere every single time. The first order of business, take a break. Leave if you have to leave for 5, 10 minutes or 15 minutes or an hour. Always be responsible. I'm leaving. Here's why. Here's when I'm coming back. There's an explanation and a promise of return, not a rupture. But if you need to take some time, take some time. Re-regulate yourself. Do some breathing. Do some mindfulness. Do some inner child work. Talk to your little boy or little girl that's so triggered. I'll tell you a story. I like to tell stories. This is inner child work, which we do. This is Robert Bly. How many of you know Robert? Robert Bly, men's movement? Yeah. So it was back when he was 60. His wife was throwing him a 60-year birthday party. And he was doing that typical male thing. He was being like, where's my socks? It's my goddamn birthday party. I can't even get a clean pair of socks around here. What the hell's going on? He was doing that thing. Any of you guys know that at all? I don't know. I've never done that, but maybe you have. Anyway, but being a guy who works on himself and a poet and a part of the men's movement, he wasn't content just to act that out. So he sat down, he went to the bathroom, sat down on the john, closed his eyes, and looked into himself. And he said, what's going on? Well, what are you so disgruntled about? And as he tells the story, what came floating up to him was him at 6, the 6-year-old him. And Robert grew up in an alcoholic, abusive, violent family. The 6-year-old was pissed. And the 6-year-old says to him, yeah, sure, the 60th birthday party for you, old man. Who the hell needs that? I am the little boy. I'm the one that should have had the birthday party. What the fuck about me? Who cares about you? And Robert said, he looked at that little boy and he put him up on his lap and he put his arms around him. And he said to him, hey, listen, I'll tell you what. That party downstairs, you stick with me. It'll be our party. All those other people out there, fuck them. That's inner child work. After he did that work, he came back and he was not the bear that he was before he did that work. That's our responsibility. If you're triggered, it's your responsibility to do some inquiry. Gosh, what's going on with me right now? And that you get a grip on it and don't just act it out. You move from disharmony back, you move from the triggered state into a more centered state, and you move from disharmony back into repair. Now, what does repair mean? A lot of people that I work with have no idea what repair means. As I said, the relationship to relationships is passive. In our culture, you get what you get, and then if you don't like it, you complain about it. That's how we try and get more of what we want, is by complaining about what went wrong. This is the worst behavioral modification program I've ever heard. Would you do this to a dog? Would you punish a dog every time it did something wrong and not give him any rewards when he did it right? But we do this with our partners. I was on Good Morning America once. I said, I want men and women across America to treat each other as well as they treat their dogs. And as cleverly as we treat our dogs, because you reward good behavior as well as just bitching about what went wrong. So there are 3 phases. I told you I'd be practical. There are 3 phases of getting what you want in a relationship. This is the first of 5 winning strategies, getting what you want. The first is what I call daring to rock the boat. This is the phase where you grab your partner by the collar and you say, whatever it is, the way you talk disrespectfully to me, I can't take it. Or our sex life needs work. Or we're drifting apart and we don't talk to each other. Daring to rock the boat is when you grab your partner by the collar and say to him or her, this is really important to me, you better damn well pay attention. It's assertive. It's healthfully aggressive. I mean business, pay attention. The second phase is when your partner starts to pay attention. And a lot of people, as Diane was saying, a lot of people just blow right by this phase. It's like, I need you to pay attention to this. I need you to pay attention to this. Okay, I'll pay attention to it. No, I need you to pay, okay. And they just doesn't even compute that they're getting what they asked for. So once your partner starts to listen and tries in good faith to give you more of what you want, the second phase is let go of the sword, let go of the shield, and help out. Nobody does this. You have to be taught to do this. I call this letting him or her win. You want them to win. You know why? Because winning means they give you what you've been asking for. The relational golden rule is as follows. Ready? Tell me your name. Al, of course, Al. I'm sorry. Forgive me, my block. Al, tell me what I could give you to help you give me more of what I'm asking for. That's the relational golden rule. What can I do for you to empower you to come through for me? What do you need from me? How can I help? How many of us do that? Because when you do that, you're not thinking patriarchally, you're thinking like a team. And the shift from patriarchal thinking to relational thinking is a shift from linear thinking to what I call ecological thinking. Patriarchy rests on two pillars. Masculinity rests on two pillars. The first is the delusion of dominance, power over instead of power with, and the second is the denial of vulnerability. We're going to talk about all that. But getting back to relationships. It's not about you. It's not about objective reality. It's not about the truth. It's about the team. When you stop thinking patriarchally and start thinking relationally, you start thinking ecologically. Your relationship is your biosphere. You're not above it. You're in it. You have the humility of understanding you're a subcomponent part. It is in your interest not to pollute your biosphere over here with your anger, because you're going to breathe in that pollution over here as your partner's resentment or withdrawal. You are in the system. It's in your interest to keep that system clean. What's that old proverb? Happy wife, happy life. It's in your interest. So I don't talk to people about altruism. I talk to people about enlightened self-interest. It's in your interest to make this work for both of you. You see, when you start thinking ecologically, it's not idealized pie in the sky. It's realpolitik. For example, from a relational perspective, if one of you wins and the other one loses, you both lose. Okay, and everybody nods like, yeah. Do you know why? You know why you both lose if one of you wins and one of you loses? I'll tell you why. Because the loser will make the winner pay for it. Count on it. Count on it. It's not in your interest to bully your way through. Short-term gain, long-term resentment. Get smart. What I am trying to introduce people to, and what all these skills are about, is breaking into and preserving what I call relational joy. When I work, particularly with men, I talk about the distinction between gratification and relational joy. And a lot of the people that I work with, particularly men, have no idea what real relational joy even looks like or feels like. So it goes like this. Gratification is a short-term hit of pleasure. And it's great. It's gratifying. I love it. You know, an orgasm, smoking a joint, drinking a beer, having a party with your friends, whatever. Pleasure is great in its place. Relational joy is the deeper down pleasure that you get just from the attachment itself. How many of you are parents? Let me see hands. Okay, quite a few. The easiest place to get this is parenting. You know, my little Alexander, when he was this big, I was giving him a timeout. And we don't have locks on our door, so I was holding the door shut to his room so he wouldn't come out. And he was trying to get it open, right? He's like this big, right? And I want to tell you, like lightning was coming out of the house, and the whole place was like shaking, and clouds were, it was like from a horror movie. And while I wanted to throw this little guy out the window, there was another part of my heart that was thinking, you mighty little spirit, you. You know what I mean? You're going to do all right. That's relational joy. Was he gratifying? Son of a bitch, no. Was I happy to be there? Wouldn't be anywhere else in the world. That's about the beauty of connection. And people in our culture, and I think men in particular, need to be introduced to that beauty. Because a lot of the men that I see are living lives that are driven by gratification. And they have little to no relational joy in them. So I thought I'd show you a little tape of a guy in early stage relational recovery. Is that okay? It's only 10 minutes. Yeah. Okay, if I can get it to work. This is a guy, Peter. I think you'll be amused at his coming to mindfulness about some of his own grandiose traits, which we've been working on. He was helped out in confronting those grandiose traits by a terrific therapist called his wife. And then he moves into the discovery of relational joy. So this was a real session. Peter is a fabulously successful man. His relationship when I first met him was in dire straits. He was at the tail end of a total infatuation with a woman, an affair. He was completely alienated from his wife and his children. And during the course of our work together, he came back. So this is about 2.5 months. I don't do long therapy. It's months to a year or so. So this is about 2.5 months in to his work. And I think it's pretty self-explanatory. It's 11 minutes long, so relax. Uh-oh. We need sound? Are we okay with that? Somebody helping me with that? Yes, it's on this end. It is? Give me a second, everybody. Thanks for your patience. I'm just going to do this to see if I can get sound. No, there's no sound. There was sound earlier. No. Oh, that's a shame. Huh? You want to do just the closed captions and watch it and read it? Huh? I did? All right. Well, there we go.
But I love that she...
All right, here we go. I don't know how that happened.
The other day, on Saturday, I'm shooting in our backyard, and we've got a big yard, but every once in a while, an arrow misses the target by a bit, and it ends up on this easement between me and our neighbor, but it's technically his property. And this year we've had so much rain that it's just so overgrown with weeds and flowers and stuff. And so on Saturday, I lost like 3 arrows, which is I mean, that's normally what I'd lose in a month, and I lost him in one day. I was taking some really heroic shots. And so she and I are over there. But the brush is so thick that there's no way you're going to see these arrows unless you start tearing some of it back. So I am just tearing it. And it's like 30 minutes later, I have created a huge mess everywhere on the easement, on everything. And we find 3 arrows, by the way, so I'm just delighted. And Jill comes out and she's just terrified. She's like, "What have you done?" And I'm like, what do you mean? I'm just looking for my arrows. She's like, "You have ripped up Amy and Hal's, like, all the flowers." And I'm like, "Flowers? These things are weeds. They're not even flowers. I'm doing them a favor." And she's like, "And look at the mess all over the driveway." And I just hadn't really paid any attention to it. And sure enough, it looked like a bomb had gone off. And she's like, "You're going to clean that up." And I was like, "Really?" She's like, "Yes." And so she went and got the blower and I cleaned it all up. And, I initially didn't think much of it, but we were out for lunch later and she said, "I contemplated saying nothing and just rolling my eyes, but I realized that's what your parents would have done. They would have just let little Peter the King do whatever he wanted. And you needed to know that, like, maybe they won't care that you ripped up half the flowers and weeds on an easement, a few hundred yards from their house, but maybe they will, and you've got to own this and take responsibility for it, and you have to clean up the mess you made. And oh, by the way, if they're upset about it, you're going to go up and apologize too." And I was like, yeah, I guess that's right. I mean, that's an example of grandiosity. It just never occurred to me that I shouldn't tear the shit out of someone else's yard to get my arrows.
Yeah, it's what a friend of mine, Jeffrey Kerr, calls privileged obliviousness. It's a male characteristic. Oh, this giant mess I just made in the driveway that we all share. Well, I just don't need to notice it because I have the entitlement to not have to. But you weren't even waiting for mother to clean you up. You just did what the fuck you wanted. That little adapted Peter, King Peter, the Pasha on the pillow. Those are my arrows, man. Don't get in the way.
But I love that she sees
we do that. We do that for each other in couples. We regulate each other.
Yeah, it's only now that I sort of realize how none of this was ever mirrored for me. Like, that the opposite was mirrored. Like, I used to think it was just funny how much of a mess my dad made.
Mm-hmm.
Because he was such a good cook. Like, he'd come in the kitchen and rip it apart, and it would be a disaster after, but you'd have this incredible meal. And even my wife would look afterwards, and she was like, "Oh, I dread when he comes over and cooks because it'll take me a day to clean it after." And I just thought it was sort of funny, but I really now reflect on it, and it's like, but that's what I grew up seeing was if he was going to, it's not like he was home or cooking much because he had a restaurant, but when he was, there was never a thought that he'd clean something up after.
God forbid.
Yeah, and again, it just because in him it came from a jovial place, not an angry place or an arrogant place.
It doesn't matter. It falsely empowered you.
Yeah, right. Yeah. But I don't think I even could observe that until recently.
Yeah, I know. This is all new. Listen, I'm an RSO in recovery. I remember when I was at Smith College getting my social work degree, there were little refrigerators, in the dorms. And it would be late at night, and maybe I'll have the munchies from smoking a joint or two. And I'll come and I'll raid the refrigerator.
And eat someone else's food.
And eat somebody else's food. Now, about once a week, I would come in with like $100 worth of food and stock the refrigerator for everybody. And you know what? People were still pissed at me because I ate their goddamn food. It didn't make it up. That was my narcissism. I thought, well, like your dad, well, I'm making such a great meal. Everybody else can clean up after me. Or you're getting your arrows. Privilege of obliviousness. Good thing to wake up to. My first language is selfishness. My second language is relationality. I'm pretty fluent at it at this point. I've lived in relationality for a long time. But I still have to think about it even now. What's that like to hear?
I think it's encouraging. It makes me realize it's okay that this has to be conscious. It's okay that I may never get to the point where thinking and behaving from a relational standpoint is as innate as it is for me not to.
Yeah, it becomes almost as in, it's like you speak fluently or you ski well, or you're no longer thinking about putting your toe at the top of the boot, bending your leg in unison. You're just skiing, and you do master it. But you always have good days and bad days, and there are always tracks that you have to take a breath and stop.
I think it's hard for me to now realize that life could be so enjoyable that it's actually worth living despite how finite it is. Whereas before, I think there were a lot of times when I thought, what the fuck? This is sort of such a miserable grind anyway. Who cares? Like, you still want to, I never wanted to not live, but I don't think I enjoyed it enough that it really mattered. And now I actually feel like I want to slow time down so much. I mean, I think about all of these experiences with my kids and I think, God, like, I don't want them to ever leave the house. I don't want to retire. I don't want to, I just don't want anything to change.
You want to make it last.
The passage of time used to be something I always wanted. Like, let's speed this up. Let's get through this. Let's get through this. Let's get through this. Let's get to the next thing. If for no other reason than it was just a box to check. And now I feel the exact opposite. I don't know. It really bums me out when each day comes to a close.
Yeah.
And I know that that's a good thing, but it's paradoxically.
Well, I'll tell you, Peter, what it is like, I'll tell you what I want to tell you. And I mean this very simply and directly. What I want to tell you is welcome to being alive. Congratulations. Nice to have you here on the planet. Go on and take that. If those tears could speak, what would they be saying right now?
Why did it take so long?
Well, that's actually, Peter, a sign of early stage recovery. That grief. Somebody's been drunk for 20 years, they get sober, the first thing they feel is the grief of the years they lost. So yeah, you can grieve that it's taken you this long to get here. You can also celebrate the years you have left and realize that a lot of people never get here.
Yeah. You ever see the movie Logan?
Yeah, I did a while ago. Yeah, I don't remember it much. We're going to anyway.
The very last scene is incredible when he's dying. He's this guy that's immortal that really isn't supposed to die. He's been around for a couple hundred years, but he's finally dying, and he's with his daughter, this girl that he just initially couldn't stand, and now he realizes it's his daughter. And he's taken his last breaths, and he says, "So this is what it feels like." And to me, it's so obvious what that means, although it's funny because I know other people interpret that as this is what it feels like to die because he's dying. But of course, this is what it means to love.
Let that touch you.
And so I find that to be such a moving scene because I feel like I get it.
Yeah. Welcome to love. Welcome to yourself.
That's it. Thank you. Welcome to love. I'm going to take questions in a minute, but I want to end with a quote. They say it's the height of presumption to quote yourself, but I'm going to do it anyway. Being a narso in recovery. Here's a paraphrase, anyway, of the quote. It's from I Don't Want to Talk About It. Family pathology rolls from generation to generation, like a fire in the woods, taking down everything in its path, until one person in one generation has the courage to turn and face the flames. That person brings peace to his ancestors and spares the children that follow. The last thing I want to tell you is this work is not for us alone. This is a work for legacy. This is sorting out what we were handed, transforming it, and choosing what we hand on to the next generation. Remember that. One of my friends, Heidi Schleffer, a couples therapist, when she sees couples for intensives like mine, she has them bring pictures of their children. And she puts one child in each chair around them. And before she starts the work, she says to the couple, just remember, they're watching. So this is what I want you to do now. I want you to take a moment, and I want you to take a note inside yourselves, or you can jot it down. And it's this. As I'm sitting here right now as a man, as I'm sitting here right now as a woman, as a man, as a woman, the edge that I think needs working is, as a man, as a woman, the edge I need to work right now is, take 60 seconds and note that to yourself. What is my edge as a man or a woman right now? What do I need to work on? And I would like you to take this intention of working that edge with you for the rest of the day and evening. I'd like you to use it to guide you. I would like you to be that person who turns and faces the flame. Okay. That's what I got. I'll take a question or two. Thank you.
You made me cry a couple of times.
Oh, what a sweet man. Let me give you a hug.
Thank you, brother. Seriously, I mean, it's like so touching.
I know, it makes me cry too, that too.
Questions?
Questions, comments? I get a lot of money an hour. This is your big moment, you know. You should just ask me anything.
Thank you. I just finished reading your first book. But I noticed in this film that the wife said to him very directly, "You're going to do this."
Yeah.
And as a therapist, and now I'm in a new relationship with a man who has a lot of grandiosity that he's presenting with me. And I guess when I read your book, I was hoping there would be a few more pointers for the woman how to deal with the grandiose personality in the
Carol,
male.
I have a ton of pointers for women about how to deal with grandiose men. It's in my latest book,
Oh, good.
The New Rules of Marriage. So I talk about both
Oh,
in the New
good.
Rules.
Okay.
Yeah, but I don't talk to women much, and I don't want to talk about it. That's for men. Although
Okay.
women buy it. You know that. And this book about men, I like to say, appears under pillows all over America.
Like,
Anyway.
what would you say to the?
I'll tell you what I want to say to women, but this is a longer conversation.
Yeah, but just even in this film,
Yeah.
the woman said, "You're going to do this."
Yeah, I like that.
Now, yeah, I mean, is that does the
Yeah,
grandiose?
it's love for this couple because he was able to hear it in the spirit it was given.
Yes.
And he's done enough work on his narcissism and defensiveness that you can actually hear that as help, not as control. Men are
Yes.
control phobic.
Yes.
And men fear that when women tell them what to do, they're being told what to do. So there are ways that women can speak more skillfully than she did.
Yeah.
I talk to women about what I call telling the truth with love. Speaking the truth with love, standing up for yourself with love.
Yeah.
It's the difference between saying, I don't like how you're talking to me, and saying, honey, I want to hear what you have to say. Could you tone it down so I could listen? Very different things. So when I talk about empowering the disempowered, they don't move from shame to grandiosity, they move from shame to health. And so there's all sorts of skilled ways to speak
Yeah.
that cherish your partner and cherish the relationship and stand up. I'll tell you a quick story. Classic young heterosexual couple. He wanted sex all the time. She wanted sex none of the time. They were killing each other. So as a therapist, I got them to speak about what sex means to them. They never talked about it. They just stated there, I want it, I don't, I want it, I don't. Like a lot of men, this man filtered most of his emotional needs through sex. Under patriarchy, by and large, in the traditional setup, men are allowed two feelings, anger and lust. That's it. They're the only two feelings you're allowed. And so he filtered a lot of his more vulnerable feelings for attachment. Sex to him meant he was a good guy, that she loved him, that they were in good shape together, blah, 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 blah. They came in 2 weeks later and the woman said, we got it. I said, okay, tell me the story. This is a true story. She said, the next time my husband offered sex to me, instead of my usual, which is like, no, 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 go away, I walked over to him, I gave him a big hug and a big kiss. And I said to him, the first thing I want you to know is you are really hot. You are so attractive to me. You're such a handsome guy. You're a good guy. I feel so close to you. I'm so happy that we're married. And oh, by the way, I don't want to have sex tonight. And to his own amazement, true story, here's what he said. Okay. Because she has so cherished him while she was saying no, that he could hear the no. I teach women how to do that.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Out there, and then I come to you.
Hi.
Hi. Thank you for all this information. One of the things that I missed in my compulsive note-taking was when you talked about negative self-talk, you
Yes.
said there were two parts to it.
Yes, I may not have mentioned it because I've got ADD. The first part
Leaning
is
in.
leaning in and quieting that immature part of you that's so harsh. And let me say this, if you get nothing from the day, but this one thing I'm about to say, it has the power to change your lives. Here's what it is, ready? And I particularly want you therapists to note this. There is no redeeming value in harshness. None. Zero. Zip. There is nothing that harshness does that loving firmness doesn't do better. So when you stand up to that harsh voice, you don't meet harshness with harshness. You meet harshness with loving firmness. Honey, pipe down. Really, I got it. I'll buy another shirt, okay? Don't, you know. I said to that little part of me, hey, you know what? I'm a therapist. Very low cost of doing business, you know. Rent, a few tissues. This shirt, I can spare it. Don't worry about it. So you kind of pipe them down, but lovingly. And then the second step is you summon the energy of tenderness and love, and you give it to yourself. You are a flawed, imperfect human being, just like everybody else. Relax. And you hold yourself tenderly. You screwed up the shirt. You gave a great talk. It's a wash. Got it?
Yeah, thanks. And
Welcome.
again, you said 3, so I'm like,
No,
the
there are
3.
only 2.
No, the 3. But on another thing, the 3 phases of marital.
Of getting what you want?
Rocking the
Daring to
boat.
rock the boat, then helping them out. And the third phase, which I did not mention, God bless you, is you're like the executive function of my brain. And if you ever get tired of that, we can talk. But at any rate, so daring to rock the boat, helping them out, and then making it worth their while, giving them positive feedback.
Thank you.
We don't appreciate each other. Almost all American couples have what I call ADD, appreciation deficit disorder. So appreciate what you're getting. This is a spiritual principle of cherishing. In the New Rules of Marriage, I have all sorts of... The last chapter on cherishing is like 3 times larger than all the other chapters combined. It is the most powerful winning strategy. You get more of what you want by appreciating what you're already getting. Pay attention to that. Okay, yes. And Marisa, how much time do we have?
We can stay a little longer if you're okay.
I'm okay, but...
If everybody's okay. So do you have a question? Then one.
Yeah.
Sorry. Then I come to you. Yes.
Yes. Terry, could you repeat the golden rule for relationships?
Yes. What can I give you to help you give me what I want? What can I give you to help you give me what I want? Isn't that incredible when you think about it? I don't want you to be so critical of me, honey. What can I do to help you be less critical? It's amazing. What can I do on my side of the seesaw to change the seesaw and lay off trying to control you? Very, very big redirection.
Hi, thank you
Hi.
so much for the talk. I was a little bit confused whilst watching the last video that you showed us. The stage that he was talking about that he reached, or the stage that you talked about he reached that like not a lot of people reach in their life. Can you
Yes.
explain a little bit more what that stage is?
He broke through to relational joy. This guy had no feelings for his own children when I first met him. And then he talked about spending a day in pajamas with his children, binge watching old TV with his wife and kids, and that it was the best day of his life. He was no more capable of that when we first met than flying. So he woke up. He woke up to connection and what it can do for you.
And the stage he was in before was...
The stage that everybody's in when they come to see me. He was saturated. He was just saturated with patriarchal thinking. He was very successful. He was very driven, and he was very empty inside. And he was like a hungry ghost. He was chronically dissatisfied, even though he was burning up the world. He couldn't figure out why. I like to say my beat is a self-made, very smart, very successful, very hard-driving asshole. That's my beat. And Belinda, I was very proud to be able to get through to these grandiose narcissistic guys until the day my wife, Belinda, said to me, have you ever wondered why you in particular do well with this? Okay.
Oh God.
Yeah,
One more?
over here.
One more, and then we're gonna do something else. Yes.
Just on that grandiose, successful asshole,
Yeah.
you know, I see that is like a coping strategy in the for whatever field they're in.
Yes.
But then they bring it home,
Yes.
and they're still that version. What do you say about creating a gap, and can you be that at home and the successful grandiose asshole in
At
the real
work.
world?
Well, the successful grandiose asshole at work is probably getting well paid for it. The culture at large rewards adaptive children. The culture at large is actually nervous about functional adults. The culture at large is nervous about intimacy. It likes stability. So,
but in your work, do you see that you can actually achieve it in both?
I like to tell stories, so I'll tell you. This is one of my favorite stories of all time. I was in Maasai land. Whenever a guy tells me, but I'm a stockbroker. I wage war all day, and then I come home and I yell at my kids. What's the problem? And I say, well, you can do one there and another. You can park your sword and shield at the front door and walk in as a peaceful man. You can do that. So, okay. Look, I was in Maasai land in Tanzania. And I had the privilege of doing a men's group with the elders of the tribe. For 3 nights, we had a men's group. And we asked all sorts of God and women and death and life. But I asked about manhood. And I said, in America, there's a debate. There are some people who think that a good man is responsible and steady and tender and nice. There are other people who think that a good man is fierce and strong and capable. What makes a good Morani warrior? What makes a good man? And this is a true story. This little guy about 4'3" stands up and it goes from Maasai to Swahili to English to Swahili to Maasai. And this is what he said to me. And I'm saying this to you. He said, I have no interest in talking to you about what makes a good Morani, a good warrior. I'm only interested in talking to you about what makes a great Morani. He said, now listen, when the moment calls for tenderness, a good Morani lays down his sword and shield and is sweet like a baby. When the moment calls for fierceness, a good Morani takes out his sword and he's a killer. What makes a great Morani, according to this 4'3" little guy, what makes a great Morani is knowing which moment is which. Now, if those guys in the bush in Tanzania can figure that out, we can figure that out.
Oh, I would close on this one. Thank you, Terry. Thank you. 1 second. Michaela, why don't you come here and we introduce the afternoon? So we finally see Michaela and Terry together.
Yes.
And because they will be the team of the day, because in the afternoon, everything will move from this conversation to this conversation. We'll go to a circle and start practicing. This is for you.
Hello. So Terry and I will lead the men and the women separate this afternoon. I don't know what Terry's going to do with the men, but I can tell you what we're going to do with the women. We're going to explore how our bodies are in relationship with ourselves, so sensitivity to our own body. And then how does that sensitivity translate into feeling someone else? And we'll work on getting out of the head into the body, using the body as a feeling tool and then as a tool of connection. And we'll have some fun with that. And there'll be all different kinds of ways that we're going to engage with that.
That's marvelous.
And then I'll let you know what happens after that, when Terry and I talk during dinner, right?
We call this emerging design.
And so tonight we'll do a joint session, which I'm very much looking forward to.
Me too. Yeah, I have a mic.
The mic, good.
Us guys, we're going to talk. And we're going to go, we do want to talk about it. And we are going to talk about it in different configurations and different groups. We're going to go deep with each other and open our hearts. So that's my agenda. And then we're putting it all together again this evening with both men and women together. Great.
Yeah.